Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Point Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm Dev.
And I'm Hugh, and on today's show, we're going to be looking at minute 11, which will allow Dev to speak once again about the improbability of the office that the Cusacks are working in.
This office does not stop fascinating me, but joining us for the whole of this week, we are lucky enough to have David Forsyth of many podcasts, including the recently wrapped up Edge of Tomorrow podcast and a brand new podcast, hopefully coming soon, that David might tell us about a little later on.
Yeah,
Welcome, David.
We'll maybe schedule that new one for 2024, maybe 25. We'll see. But yeah. Slow going around here.
I mean, we don't even know when this one's going to be starting to drop yet because we're still trying to figure things out. Right. We're just capturing audio at this point.
Hopefully January.
I'll just throw a number out and then people can decipher it in the past. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good. So, what can I just ask briefly, David? Because when Dev proposed this podcast to me, I was not familiar with the movie by minutes formula. Are you obviously you've been part of it? You're aware of it. Do you have any idea how it started?
Sure. Yeah. The first one to kind of run with this format of the a week of minutes that kind of drops on Monday through Friday thing was Star Wars Minute. Those guys are sort of the progenitors of the format. There was another one before that called, oh gosh, I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it was about the Farley brothers movie where they're Amish bowling. I can't remember the name of that. Kingpin. Yeah. So I think it was called Gutterballs. Now that I think about it, was the name of that. That did a similar sort of format where they were covering it minute by minute, but it didn't do the daily sort of drop kind of thing, which is sort of the whole, we don't stick to it real tightly in the community. There's a lot of people who do like a 5-minute episode or do like 2 minutes a week kind of thing. That's kind of what we did. Was a 2 minutes a week, and took us forever to release a 120-minute movie, but whatever. So yeah, it was but yeah, that's sort of the basics of it.
Cool.
That's when I first heard about the format, that was the first one I heard of, was Star Wars Minute, and I was like, wait, what? People are doing what now? And I looked at it and it was real, and it wasn't the first one I listened to though. After I saw that there was a Star Wars Minute, I saw that there was a whole list of them, and someone was doing Alien Minute, and I was like, whoa, I need to listen to that one. And they're real good, because the guys who did that almost treated it like a film school class about Alien, which was great. They really broke it down shot by shot and kind of talked about some of the composition of the story, composition of the shots, and the lighting and all that stuff, and a lot of the tech effects. And that was a really good one. That one was one that really drew me in. So yeah.
I do love the variety of approaches that this format allows for. Pete and Alex, who did Star Wars Minute, I think they kind of went more down the comedic angle, and there are a few other podcasts that have pushed even further in that direction. But at the same time, you can go super technical. You can go back into the kind of the actual cinematography, the direction. I feel like, especially with both Star Wars Minute and the Indiana Jones Minute podcast, there's a lot of talk about Foley artists, which I mentioned before, because obviously it's Ben Butt. So how can you not speak about that? So
when we were prepping for Edge of Tomorrow Minute, one of the ones that we obviously took a lot of inspiration from was Groundhog Day Minute, or Groundhog Minute. I forget exactly what they titled it, but the Movies by Minute project about the movie Groundhog Day. Let's just say that. And they started out pretty typical, but then in the middle they shifted and got very philosophical about like the concepts of what does this time looping thing mean, and to get out of it by being a good person, what does that mean? And so I mean, they kind of got deep on it. I was like, wow, that's it's sort of and those guys are just kind of two goofballs, but they finally did really kind of dive in and found their voice with that philosophy. Sorry guys, I didn't mean to call you goofballs, but you know what I mean. they would probably agree with it, but
they probably just started watching The Good Place.
That's right, that's probably true.
All right, so This minute then, minute 11. Dev, your favorite movie in the world. Tell us about this minute.
So in this minute, we start with John Cusack, Martin Blanc, fiddling with the lamp on top of a filing cabinet in his office by his desk, kind of harking back to that conversation we had last episode about how he feels uncomfortable in an office environment. And we see Joan Cusack and Martin Blanc interacting face to face for the first time as she passes on the feedback from the last client and how they are not happy with his performance in the job, ending the minute with I got a black cat Friday the 13th kind of feeling about this.
This is a great line.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrific line. Another sort of crisp piece of writing. We it's so well written, this film, just so well written. And again, it's very interesting that Armitage allowed. He did. We were saying a few episodes ago how he's spoken on in interviews to various bloggers about the idea that he would shoot the script as written, then he would shoot an understated take, then he would say "Go wild." And they pieced the film together from these, and I really maybe one day we'll get a commentary and we can find out which takes are which.
Yeah.
Because the
I'd
two
love to
Cusacks riffing.
I'd love to get the DVD where it just like each scene is labeled like as written, understated, overblown.
That would be incredible.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. I don't know how much of the footage remains, but that's what he said. He said apparently he struggled to cut it down to the runtime it is. He wanted to keep it at 100 minutes, and it's at 109. So again, that's another interesting thing is the amount of work that went into editing it. But
because
yes,
he'd never done anything that we would consider comedy before this, right? I mean,
not really. I mean, Miami Blues had a hint of comedy. Well, it has comic moments, but it is very much hard boiled pulp fictionist. And then his earlier stuff was much more. Vigilante Force is typical, end of 70s action stuff. It was all a bit more kind of down to earth, gritty stuff. And I think, but I think he has one foot in each territory. I think that's the thing that makes him interesting is he understands how to. He understands how to deliver the crisp action thriller, and therefore the room for the comedy. Sort of, he knows how to allow it to happen and not force it, and I think that's quite interesting as a director. Because Miami Blues, no one expected it to be as funny as it was. The whole business with the scene in the Miami airport with the what's called the Hare Krishna is just it's one of the great sort of memorable scenes from that, and it's like that. I feel like that adaptation is almost not quite a dry run for this, but it does feel like Armitage has found a certain groove that works for both him and the audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the sense I've gotten from reading some of his writing is that he felt like he'd got it really well nailed down in Miami Blues, except for the ending. And I'm not going to go into what that is, but I think that's where he felt like he'd kind of let the audience down a little bit, was that ending was unsatisfying to many viewers. And I think part of this movie is him bringing up the comedy a little bit and changing that ending so that the outcome is a little bit different, so that it gels a little better.
Yeah. And I think the Cusacks are also at the heart of it as well. I mean, this really feels like the definitive Joan Cusack moment, but also the definitive John Cusack film. I mean, I know most people would say High Fidelity, but this is the first time he's a producer. This is the first time, it's the second time I think he's writing with these friends of his. But do you know what I mean? It's still early days for him as the person in charge of the creativity.
Yeah. And I think this scene in particular, and it's a shame that we've kind of ended up splitting it right in the middle of the dialogue, but this scene in particular, I feel like it's probably something that could only be sold by two people who knew each other as well as these two know each other. The back and forth. I mean, I think this is probably one of the sections. I haven't checked the script that we have, but I think this is one of those sections where they probably went off script a little bit. And I think you can feel that they just have that natural relationship, the chemistry, to really sell this scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're both really doing their characters' storytelling justice in this too. They're not just being brother and sister interacting. I mean, clearly the rapport is there between them, but I think they do a lot of storytelling with their actions here. You know, the when Joan waits outside of the office to be called in and is sort of meek, but you know that she's not that meek person. We've seen that side of her already. We know that what is about to unfold was at least in part orchestrated by her, right? I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
she's got a motive that she's advancing, but she's playing the subordinate secretary role
Mm.
in some sense to the role within the role. Her
Yeah.
character isn't that meek person, but she's doing it to advance what she needs to do here. So
Yes, and we've talked about how she's a much more assertive character when they are apart. One of the things we mentioned in previous episodes is the fact that she's the one who actually has the office. He's sat at the
Mm-hmm.
receptionist desk, which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense because he's probably never in the office really very
yeah,
often. She's the one that has the computer. She's the one that runs the show, but she knows who she's dealing with, and so whenever she's face to face with him, there's a lot more of that timidity and hesitation,
Mm.
I feel.
Well, I mean, it's that thing of knowing that the person who can commit to violence
yeah, yeah.
quite easily is now in the same building and the same room as you.
Well, we see that there's a point where when she mentions that he can go to his reunion again, like she's already been told not to bring it up, and she brings it up again. He has sort of a violent, just a flash, right? Like he stands up
Mm,
and kind of pushes things around on the desk, and she flinches a little. Like you can see her eyes get big, but she
mm,
doesn't rear back. I mean, but I think part of the working for a contract killer of a violent person is yeah, part of what is part of that meekness, but also, she just knows his personality, right? She knows how to push his buttons a little bit, and being her loud, assertive self isn't going to get done what she needs to get done.
mm. It's also interesting that this is a few years. Well, this is several years after we've had a couple of some interesting takes on the secretary in
Hmm.
American film and TV. I mean, I'm thinking back to Twin Peaks season 1, where you've got both an unseen secretary, but you know who she is, and there's a sense of her personality through the kind of messages he's recording for her. And you also have the secretary in the sheriff's station as well,
Yeah,
Lucy. Who was a very interesting character, and again a very kind of different take on that sort of character. And so for me, there's a kind of an interesting. It's not a particularly big trend, but it just feels like there's a sort of a sense of that role maybe returning in some ways to some of the more kind of glorious moments in the 40s. I don't know. But there's kind of a distinction of recognizing that these women actually hold a degree of power in a way
Hmm.
that people, a lot of film and TV did not always offer them that. It could be quite a thankless role. And instead, Joan just makes this something interesting and different, and beyond just what's on the page. It's as you say, the physical nature of how she performs as well in this scene is just so interesting.
Yeah,
Um, and I
it's a
think
very
that's sorry, go.
oh sorry, I was going to say it's a very 9 to 5 ish kind
Yeah.
of play of that, where they hold the power, they know they hold the power, the boss knows they couldn't get by without them, but they keep the dynamic boss employee. Like
Mm,
they run this kind of masquerade of that dynamic, even though
mm,
they know that all the business happens
mm,
in that subordinate person. I'm doing air quotes for the people who can't see.
yeah.
Doing in that subordinate's role. So yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
Um, so I was just actually pulling up the script and having a look at this scene in the script, and much of it plays out the same. But I think a lot of the really bright moments of this script um, are actually impromptu. They're not written down in this version of the script, at least. Although I will say the Broken Mirror, Black Cat, Friday the 13th kind of feeling is in the script.
Oh, interesting.
But also the Greenpeace boat bit, which
Mm.
Yeah.
we actually see several minutes ago, was originally meant to be in this scene as an alternate to the Detroit gig.
Ah. Okay. So they moved that to the car. So presumably they thought it was funnier then.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Huh. Interesting. I was telling someone about that joke yesterday, just in passing. It's just one of those things that if you're old enough to have seen this film in the cinema, as my friends yesterday were, we were kind of just. We were talking about something political and so and various sort of conspiracies that have proven to be real, and as opposed to ones that aren't. And yeah, it just popped up, and it just made me think once again how this film world builds in its own way. It grounds the fantasy, if you like, of the not quite Melville-esque, romantic assassin thing, but it's almost that, very stylish. But it certainly grounds where he is, the world he's in, nicely.
Yeah.
So, what about, Dev? I want to drag you back to the thing. I know we do this on a regular basis, but The Office, right? Do you really think? Do you really? I'm not keen though, because since we go over these minutes, I'm sort of kind of halfway in agreement with you, and then there's another aspect of it in which I kind of feel. I don't know enough about Los Angeles architecture historically to know, to be able to, because your point is that these sorts of offices only exist in fiction.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I really believe that. This is the same person. This is the same person that swore black and blue that possums did not really exist. So there is, any
You're admitting
opinion
that.
I have.
You're admitting that on this one, Mike.
I grew up learning that marsupials lived in the Antipodes, right? And that's where all marsupials were. And then I find out about possums in America, and I'm like, well, that clearly can't be true because there aren't marsupials in America. They all live in the Antipodes. And
But who
I
told
may
you
have now seen one and proven myself wrong, but until that point. So yeah, for me, this is a style of office that is used in movies a lot. It is very reminiscent of film noir.
Yep.
You see this a lot there. You also see maybe slightly different but similar renditions of this kind of semi-open plan, lots of glass windows, lots of this kind of very red wood. I can't even think what it is. Oak, I guess.
Probably, yeah.
Furnishings and you know um, walls and doors made the same way. In police procedurals, I think of Due South when I think of this a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think Mike Hammer.
and
Yeah,
and
it has a
yet
very noir office feel to me. Yeah,
it is, right? And
yeah.
and yet I've never seen anything like this in real life. You sometimes see
Interesting.
this kind of architecture in psychiatrists' offices as well,
Ah.
especially in the 80s and 90s, right? I think psychiatrists portrayed these days tend to have a more modernist aesthetic. They have a more, swanky office space. But certainly for this time, when maybe that was a less lauded career option in popular culture, if not in real life, um, it feels, it's something that I've not seen anything that even approximates it. And as you said, like in LA in particular, I feel like this is an odd look. I could see it more in like the brick tenement buildings that you tend to get, or the brick office buildings that you tend to get in Chicago, maybe in New York, in some of those older cities on the Midwest and the East Coast.
Interesting.
But it does seem incongruous to the kind of bright, sunny, palm treed LA that we're meant to
Yeah.
be in.
Interesting. Do
It
you
does have
think that
some.
this is part of what ties it to kind of the neo-noir movement of the 90s? Because this is coming out, at the tail end of that.
I think it definitely is, right? This is a edgy reimagining of film noir, right? It's a character that is somewhat ambiguous in their morality and in, they're not a traditional hero. They're not the superhero character. They are a much more grounded quasi real person. They have, their uh, their loyal secretary. They go out. They go to save the dame in the end. It's very much that kind of arc that you're used to in film noir, in the Maltese Falcon or whatever. I do think it was an intentional choice from that perspective, rather than really worrying about the realism of such an office space. And assuming these offices really do exist, I'm sure there is probably somewhere in LA that does have something like this, or did at this time.
Interesting.
I'm definitely picturing this in a larger multi-use office building, right? There are lots of, like, there's probably an accountant down the hall and whatever, and they pay month by month. It comes furnished, right? They didn't pick these dueling ship pictures
I was
in the
just going to
background
say that.
out, right? And like there's weird features to it too, like when he's sitting at his desk, there's a power outlet at head height behind him. Like,
Yeah.
that's sort of unusual, right? Like, that's not where we usually would find them. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I think, a place that was chosen for an assassin's office because they didn't ask any questions on the application, right? They can pay month to month. They can get in and out quickly. It might be, close to the freeway. It might be, like, have other sort of geographic features. So to me, it it screams low key and temporary. In addition to the noir. Excuse me, let me try that again. In addition to the noiry bits that you guys talked about, I think it's got. I mean, the lighting coming through the blinds is a total noir move, right? I mean, that's full on, just like the most stereotypical private
you're
dick
absolutely
lighting.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
And it's also kind of a juxtaposition to something like Office Space, right? Which is all of the the plasterboard and the acoustic tiles on the ceiling, with that drop ceiling that you get. This is like the antithesis of this. This isn't Neo living in the Matrix. This isn't Office Space. This isn't the drudgery of a boring day job. This is entrepreneurial almost, right? It's
sure.
Yeah. I must admit, it's funny you mentioned the more typical office of 97, 98, and I'm just sort of imagining Martin Blanc, because I cannot see him, even temporarily, for the sake of 2 months rent or whatever, going into that kind of building or office. Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of world he just cannot stand.
Yeah. It also brings up another interesting point too, because you think a lot of these, assassins for hire or whatever might have like a day job that disguises what they really are. But I mean, he doesn't have assassin on his office door, but he clearly isn't living a lifestyle that is trying to disguise what he does. He has a place, an office that he goes to. He has, I don't know, it's not hidden, I guess, is he doesn't have an alternate identity.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, he just is him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For those of you listening to Hugh's acoustic in the background,
Sorry,
it is Diwali weekend, and
Yes.
so there are plenty of fireworks going off around the UK.
Sorry about that. Yes, not a lot I can do about that.
We'll probably get some of those here in New Jersey as well. It's
Yes,
cool.
yeah,
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, no, we have we're the one part of Buckinghamshire that has a fairly significant Asian population. Nice. It's a fairly it's one of the more traditional British counties normally, but this town I live in is it's a university town, and there's a lot of immigrants who've set up various kinds of businesses and that are now quite well established. So I'm a secondary school teacher by day, so I'm usually teaching the boys in question. So yeah, but yes,
so my question for this is, who chose this office? Was this a I'm going to delegate this to Marcella, and Marcella is going to just find me something that's going to work for my needs, or is this Martin Blanc wanting to relive that film noir vibe of characters he idolized as a child, or that did he want to embody that as part of his citizen of population country population one kind of thing, that he is a man alone.
I mean, they sort of lead you to believe that Marcella is the details person, right? Like she handles all of the logistics and everything. So in that instance, and the fact that she has set herself up in the office, right, in the private, like the good part of it, would lead me to believe it's her. But yeah, I think there is something about the image that Martin sort of, they give hints to in his personality too. So I think it could certainly go either way. But my bet would be on Marcella. So
And maybe it's just a testament to how well Marcella knows Martin, that
sure,
she was able to find something that would appeal to him.
right?
Well, do you guys think it appeals to him? There's something about the way he prowls around at the beginning, and I can't work out if that is just him working out how he's going to deal with the upcoming confrontation. Because for a man who likes killing people, who's good at killing people, he doesn't like confrontation a lot. And how much of that is him going, wait, oh yeah, I remember this place now. Why doesn't this work now? Just he seems really uncomfortable in that space.
So I think for me, it's one of those things where the idea of having this office was one thing, and the reality of coming into this office is a different thing. I can imagine him as thinking, the hard-boiled detective, freelance private detective, the Dick Tracy, that this is what he wanted his office to look like when he had to set up an office. But then the reality of coming in, he's still very uncomfortable, because this is not where he wants to be. This is not his idea of what he wants to be doing for a job. He just didn't think through the reality of coming into this building every day. He just saw it as an iconic image for him.
Okay, I can buy that. David, anything else on this minute? I think we're coming to the end of what we can say about this minute without looping over into the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of what I would want to throw out here probably does kind of bridge into the next one, but I think it's maybe a testament to the storytelling structure of this one, that at minute 11 we have the main conflicts, if not the details and the characters, laid out already, right? Like we know we have a contract killer who's at odds with contract killing association, that is sort of hinted at, that he's not so great at his job right now because he's having conflicts, and that he's going to be attending his reunion, and that's causing him mental anguish and questioning. All that's laid out here by minute 11 already, right? The rest of what we're going to get is adding more interesting characters, adding a couple of motivations here and there, and some details. So I think it's a very efficient story up to this point.
Yeah, this whole film is very high tempo and
Yeah,
unapologetic about it. It has a
agreed.
lot going on in almost every minute of the film. There's
Yeah.
a lot of
Then
dialogue. It's quite rapid dialogue. It's not expositionary, and everything is very well set out to keep that pace going and to keep the user engaged, or
yeah,
the viewer engaged, I should say.
I think the only other thing I had is that I think this is probably the most, I'm not sure how to phrase this. So the Cusacks have obviously been in movies together before, but I think this is the one where they are both fairly prominent within the film. Like this is the one where they're both most prominent throughout the entirety of the film together. I think like they're both in 16 Candles. They were both in High Fidelity. They're both in what was that, War Inc., the one that was sort of the sequel ish to this. But I mean, this was the first one I think where they both sort of let themselves be fully in touch characters throughout the whole thing, and I think it's fun. So
Yeah.
So anyway, cool.
Okay,
Alrighty.
then. So, this was minute 11 of the Grosse Point Blank Movies by Minutes podcast, aka Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, co-producers, Dev Salagar and Hugh David.
Today's guest was David Forsyth. You can find him at... Where can we find you, David?
edgeoftomorrowminute.com has that whole show. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. And you can find us at all good podcast players, also on YouTube, Twitter, aka X, whichever of those it currently is, the artist formerly known as well as Spotify. And on all of those, we are at Debi Radio or on our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is DEBI Radio. So that's one B and an I. No E, no Y, no second B.
And if you want to talk with us, there's a Facebook listener group as well, Debi Radio 79.5 FM fan club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling of movement.